This year, 2020, begins a new decade that promises to be one of dreadful disruptions, with Africa holding the weakest end of the stick. As with most parts of the world, what started out as a health crisis has also turned into a humanitarian and economic crisis. In 2008 to 2009, the global Great Recession was triggered by financial crisis in the US, the world's largest economy. Then, much of Africa was said to be decoupled from the crisis and muddled through without severe devastation of its economies. This year, a global health pandemic that has paused the global economy and threatened to drive it into synchronized recession was triggered by the second largest economy, China. While COVID-19 infections rates have been relatively low on the African continent compared to the rest of the world, much of the region's economies are being impacted due to the various forms of restrictions being imposed on citizens. Some of the oil exporting countries, such as Nigeria, are likely to face a sharper contraction due to lower oil price. At the same time, there is a growing risk that the spread of the virus could still escalate to unmanageable levels. This is due to some additional challenges facing many African countries. COVID-19 caught the world totally unprepared and with no proven and available medical response. Many African countries have largely copied the template to varying degrees, piecemeal extensions of stay at home or lockdown orders, as many Western countries. But the question is, can Nigeria really deal with coronavirus, and can they be effective given the social and economic circumstances?
The government may be ready. They may have the know-how, and they may have that zeal to combat any disease condition. But if you look at what is happening outside, then the question arises whether the implementation is whatever to write home about. When somebody died, and when you look at the procedure of burial, it does not even follow the guidelines they are giving to every other populace outside. So when you give a guideline you cannot obey, then it's not working. Then let's look at the other side. When you tell people to obey social distance in all ramification, I wonder when social distance has become a drug or a treatment for a viral infection. Because when you keep persons at home, for example, you lock everybody in, then they are there. They have run out of food, no quality food to eat, no money to spend to buy one or two things. Then they are inside the house, they are docile. I am a scientist. You discover that at a point, the same immune system we are trying to build up that will fight against the disease they are talking about will now start breaking down. And as it's breaking down, then the persons are subjected to even more disease attack that is different from even what they refer to as COVID-19.
So far, people are calling for expanded testing, because if you don't know the magnitude of the problem you are facing, you may be able to mount adequate response as well. So, total lockdown might be called for again, though we have missed the opportunity for that. But total lockdown, we must remember, is not the absolute solution. It's to enable us, by time, to mobilize resources and confront the virus.
All lives matter, and Nigerian government must do everything to protect or save every life from the pandemic. China isolated Wuhan and kept Shanghai, Beijing, and other major economic engines open. And today, China supplies the world with medical equipment, face masks, and many others, and ranking in hundreds of billions of dollars. The idea of a total lockdown and border closure implies that Nigeria would continue to do so, with extensions until a time that they will be satisfied that the spread of COVID-19 has been arrested or on the decline. Monitoring the spread requires effective testing, and can Nigeria afford effective testing of its millions of people?
I think a total lockdown may not be necessary, because the hardship, if you look at the advantages and disadvantages, the advantages of that was that where it could help to slow down the spread of coronavirus, but the disadvantages we can observe that there are many persons who are really homeless. I've observed a situation whereby people have been asked to stay at home and you see them choking themselves in smaller apartment. You'll be surprised how many persons have been living in one-room apartment. Because they run a shift kind of lifestyle. Somebody is out there hustling, another person is in the house resting. By the time that person comes back to rest, the other one has gone out to hustle. So now they are all being forced to be cramped in one small room. So are we really helping the situation in that circumstance? Then we are looking at those who really cannot fend for themselves. People are doing, living by the day job. Either they're everybody pushers, whatever, artisans, doing things, on a daily basis that earn them a living. Now they are asked to stay at home. Where is the stimulus, to act as a palliative for them?
If the coronavirus situation is a problem that has existed in its own way, and it is something that is, as far as we know, they said it is affecting people, then with the guidelines that have been put in place, if it is followed and adhered to strictly, I'm sure we should be able to fight it. Diseases and contagious diseases, it's not something that is new. There has always been every type of some sort of like a disease. Ebola was there. Other kind of contagious disease has existed before. Somehow we always find a way to live with it. So I do believe that if we follow the necessary steps and also carry out our own little observation as to the way and manner the disease exists around us, we should be able to overcome it with time.
Social distancing in most parts of Nigeria will remain impractical. Communal living is not just about culture, it is a matter of economic survival. Hence, the statistics on infections will be coming in fits and starts. Another question we have to deal with in Nigeria is, should we continue locking down and unlocking with each episode of such, as there may probably be several such episodes, unless and until a cure is found? Even with the several weeks of stay at home or lockdowns in some African countries, the reported daily infections continue to rise. Some people may say that without the initial lockdowns, the number of infections could have been multiplied. If Nigeria cannot sustain lockdowns indefinitely or even until the spread stops or declines, it means that Nigeria would sooner or later remove the restrictions. There would still be infections which can still spread anyway. Nigeria might not be able to afford a total lockdown. Many countries depend on budget support from bilateral and multilateral donors, and with acute balance of payments problems, most are now asking for debt relief and applying for urgent loans from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Without government support, no more than 5% of Africa's 1.3 billion people can possibly survive any prolonged lockdown on their own finance. Most of the others have no assets or savings to live on for a prolonged period, and there is no social insurance welfare system. Without the pandemic, the African economic space is already in dire straits, with unacceptable unemployment rates, especially youth unemployment, as well as endemic poverty. Also, imagine the dependency burden on dearth of infrastructure. Basic electricity is deficient, which makes compulsion to stay at home hellish for most people. If Nigeria wants to continue lockdown, there must be a pause in several pressures for private expenditures on the people: monthly house rents, banks' interest payment for micro, small and medium enterprises, electricity charges, and many others.
It's for Nigeria to fight for themselves. For example, like governments going to China to ask the people to come there to conquer Nigeria. The problem China is carrying by this disease is more than the whole world. They cannot even cure their own. Look at recently now. They are even dealing with Nigerians there. Why should they allow those people to come so that they can use our money? They brought by international body. So Nigerians are to free themselves. Nobody will free them. Burkina Faso free themselves. Ghana free themselves. They no longer Ghana must go in Nigeria, but instead now Nigeria must go in Ghana.
With about 80% of Africans' population living from hand to mouth on daily toil and hustle, lockdown would never be total and almost impossible in our social settings. Attempts to force everyone into a lockdown for extended period may indeed be enforcing a hunger or stress-induced mass genocide. More people could consequently be dying of hunger and other diseases than the actual COVID-19. In normal times, thousands die every day in Africa due to other illnesses and communicable diseases such as cholera, malaria, Lassa fever, lower respiratory infections, tuberculosis, heart disease, stroke, HIV and AIDS, yellow fever, measles, typhoid, smallpox, Ebola, monkeypox, pregnancy and childbirth-related death, and so on. Lockdowns worsen these, as many of the victims of these now have little or no cash to attend to themselves. Soon, the pharmacy shops will run out of imported drugs. Even local pharmaceutical manufacturing firms need imported inputs but cannot efficiently source them under lockdowns and border closure, even more so with restrictions of movement. Soon, local adulterated ones may fill the gap. Above all, the millions of persons in the streets who are struggling between life and death each day with numerous other challenges do not and will never understand why so much additional hardship is being foisted upon them because of the novel coronavirus. For most of them, it is an elite problem, since for them, the hunger and other disease virus is more dangerous than coronavirus. Nigeria should be ready to provide for the citizen if there is need for continued lockdown. Caroline Okunji reporting.